Welcome to another edition of 123 Brain Break. My name is Miss Jillian and I work with the Council Tree branch of the Poudre River Public Library. Now today we're going to talk about voting fun because it happens to be National Voter Registration Week, and that is a time when everybody who is eligible to vote in this country is encouraged to make sure that they are registered to vote so that come election day they can exercise their right to vote. Now for kids, sometimes voting might seem confusing, it might seem really complicated, but the good news is that we can read books, we can participate in mock or pretend elections that help us understand what it means to exercise our right to vote. So today, I would like to share with you Grace for President. It's written by Kelly DiPucchio, it's illustrated by Leeuwen Pham, and its publisher is Hyperion. So let's see what Grace has to think about voting. One Monday morning in September, Mrs. Barrington rolled out a big poster with all of the president's pictures on it. Grace Campbell could not believe her eyes. "Where are the girls?" she demanded. "That's a very good question," said Mrs. Barrington. "The truth is, our country has never had a woman president." "No girl president ever?" Grace asked. "No, I'm afraid not," said Mrs. Barrington. Grace sat back at her desk and stewed. No girls? Who'd ever heard of such a crazy thing? Finally, she raised her hand. "Yes, Grace, I've been thinking it over and I'd like to be president." Several students in the class laughed. "Well, I think that's a star-spangled idea, Grace," Mrs. Barrington said. "In fact, we can have our very own election right here at Woodrow Wilson Elementary." The snickering in the room stopped. Grace smiled. "Would anyone else like to run for president?" Mrs. Barrington asked the class. Nobody raised their hand. Becoming president was going to be easy, Grace thought. I wonder if it will be as easy as she thinks. The next day, Mrs. Barrington made an announcement. "In the name of democracy, I've invited Mr. Waller's class to join our election. Their class has nominated Thomas Cobb to be their presidential candidate." Grace's heart sank. Thomas was the school spelling bee champion. His experiments always won a blue ribbon at the science fair. And he was captain of the soccer team. Becoming president wasn't going to be easy after all, Grace thought. The teachers put the names of all 50 states and the District of Columbia into a hat. Everyone except Grace and Thomas got to choose a state. "I'm Texas," said Anthony. "I'm New Hampshire," said Rose. "I'm Michigan," said Robbie. "What does the number 16 mean?" Each state is assigned a number of electoral votes. The number determined by how many people that live in that state, said Mrs. Barrington. "Each of you will be a representative for your state. Altogether, our country has 538 electoral votes," Mr. Waller explained. "On election day, the candidate who receives 270 electoral votes or more wins the election." "Why 270?" asked Rose. "That's more than half of the electoral votes," said Mr. Waller. Becoming president really wasn't going to be so easy, thought Grace. Grace came up with a campaign slogan. "Make history, vote for Grace Campbell for president." Thomas came up with his own campaign slogan. "Vote for Thomas Cobb, the best man for the job." Grace listened to what the important issues were to her students, and she made a list of campaign promises. A peaceful school, no bullies. A cleaner school, no littering. Better hot lunches, no more fish stick tacos. Thomas made up his own list of promises. Free tutoring, free soccer lessons, fish tacos every week. Grace made campaign posters and buttons. Thomas made posters and buttons too. Wow, look at all those campaign signs and all those children. Each week, teachers set aside time for the candidates to meet with their constituents. Polls were taken. Voters were making their choices. Grace continued to campaign. At recess, she gave speeches. During lunch, she handed out cupcakes. After school, she held rallies. Meanwhile, Thomas wasn't worried. He clearly had calculated that the boys had slightly more electoral votes than the girls. At recess, Thomas studied his spelling words. During lunch, he worked on his latest science experiment. And after school, he played soccer. Even before the election, Grace made good on her promises. She joined the safety squad. She organized a school beautification committee, and she volunteered her time in the school cafeteria. In early November, Woodrow Wilson Elementary hosted a special election assembly. Grace and Thomas took their places out on stage as the school band began to play. Henry was the first representative to approach the microphone. The Yellowhammer State of Alabama casts its 9 electoral votes for Thomas Cobb. Fletcher said, the last frontier state of Alaska casts its 3 electoral votes for the best man for the job, Thomas Cobb. The Grand Canyon state of Arizona cast its 11 electoral votes for Grace Campbell, Hannah called out. And so it went. State after state after state cast their electoral votes. The scoreboard in the gymnasium kept track of the totals. The voting demonstrations was quickly coming to an end. Clara approached the podium. The Badger State of Wisconsin casts its 10 votes for my best friend, Grace Campbell. Grace looked at the scoreboard. Thomas had 268 electoral votes, and Grace had 267. There was only one state unaccounted for: Wyoming. Thomas grinned. Grace felt sick. Sam walked up to the microphone. He looked at Thomas. He looked at Grace. He looked down at Grace's homemade flag. Sam didn't say a word. What are you waiting for? Thomas whispered. The band stopped playing. All eyes were on Wyoming. Finally, Sam cleared his throat. The equality state of Wyoming casts its 3 votes for Grace Campbell. The gymnasium erupted in loud cheers and a few boos. Mrs. Barrington approached the podium. With 270 electoral votes, the winner is Grace Campbell. Thomas looked stunned. Grace hugged Sam. Why did you do it? She asked. Sam handed Grace his flag. Because I thought you were the best person for the job. The following week, students in Mrs. Barrington's class were preparing for their career day presentations. Grace volunteered to go first. She stood at the front of the room and glanced at the poster still hanging on the wall. My name is Grace Campbell, and when I grow up, I'm going to be President of the United States. This time, everyone believed she would. The end. Well, boys and girls, I hope that gave you a little taste for what voting is like. If you happen to be able to come by the Council Tree Library branch between October 19th and November 2nd, we will be having our very own What's Your Vote activity set up near our lobby. And don't worry, we're not going to vote for this year's actual candidates, but we will hold simulations and mock elections for grades K through roughly middle school. So stay tuned for information on that, and happy voter registration week.